We have first a minister of tourism of Egypt, Her Excellency Rania Al-Mashad. Please welcome. Then a familiar face, of course, you just heard her, Caroline Frankenberger, once again from University of St. Gallen. Please have a seat. We have Sven Lerwag here. He's the Vice President of Industry Affairs of the Amadeus IT Group. Welcome. Andreas G. Schmid. To tell you what he's doing will kind of, take the next 10 or 20 minutes, so I'll keep it short. He's a kind of a serial entrepreneur, a serial chairman as well. Let me just give you Helvetica Capital, Zurich Airport, and of course board member of the Radisson Hospitality Group. Welcome. And last but not least, Michael Ross. Please join us as well. If his face is familiar to you, it's because he won the Startup Award 2017 with an idea which is not unlike the one we just heard. You're kind of disrupting the hospitality industry as well. To all of you, welcome. And to all of you, of course, you can discuss with us. We want to keep this as kind of chatty and interactive as possible. So I will be speaking to the panelists, yes, 10, 15, 20 minutes, who knows. But please, if you have a question, if you have a comment, if you have something to add to the discussion, it would be great that you just raise your hand. Of course, we have the Cube mic, and we have Caroline, hopefully, who will throw it to you, and so that you can ask your question as well. As we go along with the discussion. Madam Minister, let me start with you. Coming from Switzerland, I know that talking about the tourism industry, there's always a call of, okay, what does the country do? What does the government do? What can the state do? We have these famous kind of, the framework has to be right. I assume that's not different in Egypt. What can you do to kind of boost the tourism industry?
First, I'm very happy to be here with everyone, and congratulations on a very innovative start of the forum. Governments, by definition, are not innovative. And the idea...
That's kind of a downer for the beginning of the discussion.
But given everything that's happening around us, by default, they have to start actually accepting it, not resisting it, embracing the change. And when I look at tourism in Egypt, it's 20% of GDP. It's a big employer. Mm-hmm. There have been difficulties in the past, but we have rebounded, come back. And when I took office a year and 3 months ago, I wanted to put a defined framework, a policy framework where everyone, whether it's the private sector, citizens, government, the political leadership, have a shared view, a shared vision, so that everyone feels they have a seat on the table, and therefore the potential of the sector is fulfilled. So this policy framework, the shorthand of it is called the ETRIP, the Egypt Tourism Reform Program. It has an overarching objective, which is very difficult to debate, and that is every Egyptian household have at least one person working in tourism. So by having that objective, you basically align people's interests towards serving what the outcome of positive incomes, employment, etc. The idea of innovation and digitalization is extremely important because we know that in the world there are 5 billion people with mobile phones. Mm-hmm. 2.7 billion people are on social media all the time. Any traveler spends the 45 days before he travels 140 times looking for where to go. So you as a destination need to do two things. Be mindful of what people are looking for. Number two, show everything in your country in a different way. And number three, keep the promise. Mm-hmm. So now when people are looking at pictures and saying, oh, I want to be in that restaurant, I want to take that selfie and put it on Instagram, whatever you are promoting, you also have as a government to make sure that the people's journey is safe, is repeatable, and lives up to that picture.
having said that, and when you talked about the kind of turmoil that you had as well, and there were ups and downs, the numbers are quite staggering. I think 2010 you had 14 million visitors, then it dropped to 5 million in 2015, with all the reasons that we know. Right now, I think you're back to 8, 9 million as well.
11.
11 even. Having said that, did that maybe help you in kind of triggering these new changes and innovation that, sometimes you have to go through difficult times to kind of also tell the people, now we have to change?
I mean, one very important fact about Egyptian tourism, and that's something we're very proud of, that 98% of the sector is led by privately owned enterprises. And therefore, as we know, the private sector has to go through this transformation. It has to be agile. It's going for profit and loss. And therefore, our role as a government is to help the private sector fulfill their mission.
The facilitator.
Facilitator. So, for example, when the downturn happened, the political transition and so forth, the government actually gave breaks to the private sector in paying electricity bills, in paying water bills, etc., etc. So you were giving a helping hand. The other thing which is quite important, when you say you want people to be employed in the sector, today services are all done or mostly done through, as we saw, Uber, Airbnb. There is a possibility for the youth to actually provide a service through innovative ideas, the startups that we've seen. So these are opportunities for the government as much as for the citizens, because if you create an enabling environment, you are basically able to employ more people, you are basically being able to contribute to GDP, and therefore the welfare that is maximizing welfare, which is one of the objectives of the government, is also fulfilled.
When we go back to your first sentence, that a government, a state, cannot be an innovator per se. It cannot. I mean, some people beg to differ, I guess. But if I ask the industry people, maybe Sven or Mr. Schmid, do you expect the government to do that, or would you say as well, innovation, disruption, whatever, change has to come from within the industry, or would you expect the politicians, the governments, the state to be more active there?
I learned that you have a different opinion and a different way of doing business in Egypt to what we are having here in Switzerland.
Yeah, I would agree.
As a Swiss, I have to say, I don't expect that. Sometimes we talk about innovation parks and things like that, and we normally then immediately think of cement and houses, but not of what's getting in there and what is inspiring. I think here, definitely in good old Europe, we are far away of having government which are thinking innovative.
Mm-hmm. Sven, would you agree? What do you think?
Yes and no. Yes and no. I think, first and foremost, government needs to provide conditions for free enterprise to thrive and to an environment where innovation, in fact, can happen at the conditions that prevail in the marketplace. Now, in some cases, maybe it needs to provide a little bit of an additional helping hand. It could be in incubation. I've run an incubator before, so I have some experience from that. But I think there is a limit to what government should do, and many governments are overstepping that boundary and solidly wasting money in programs that they shouldn't be in. So I think that there needs to be this balance between active engagement and, on the one hand, but the facilitation of the conditions under which enterprise can thrive and innovation can happen.
I promise I won't be talking about governments all the time, but Michael, maybe in your specific case and in your kind of practical experience, you run Bidroom, as we said, a very, very innovative startup as well. You now have 85 employees. Yep. Plus 3 dogs, I read on the website as well. So it's a booming economy.
Especially 3 dogs is important.
Okay. What helped you the most in starting that feature, in starting that from scratch, a business which is now doing very well?
Well, if I go back to the story of Caroline before, she mentioned team, and I was doing coaching today of the startups. We were pitching yesterday. And a lot of startups think ID is the most important. And I don't agree. I think team is crucial, the execution of how the team is doing this, but the team you're building, that's crucial to make your business successful. And also just, now you see my job title here is COO. Before, till September, I was always CEO. And I thought it's better for the company, if we're making some changes, to go to further step. After
That's quite common, actually, that these startups change roles as well.
Yeah,
And people
a lot of people
within,
say,
right?
does it feel strange? Because you build a company, you put a lot of effort in the company, and there's an external CEO coming inside. I said, no, I think for the team, for me personally, but also for the team and for the growth of the company, it's good to make a change. So that's why I fully agree with you, this innovation team. And I think team is by far number one, the most important for success.
That collaborative spirit, that team spirit, which is very, very kind of traditional to startups as well. Calvin Frankenberg, if we compare that to the kind of more old school business as we know, and with strong hierarchies as well, as we said, people in startups often change their position as well, and they think, okay, I have been CEO now, maybe I'll change my title now. Is that what's lacking in other industries, or to put it positively, is that the big opportunity of startups, also in the tourism industry, to, as you say, to think outside the box? Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Does it work? Yeah, I think so.
It doesn't work, but yes. No, it works. Okay. Yeah, I absolutely agree. So I think people is the most important thing, and working in teams, and also this mindset of I am the CEO, but I don't need to know everything, and that's good so, because now we're in this disruptive world, and AI, blockchain, chatbot, and all those things, the CEOs don't understand that, and they don't have to understand that, but they have to have that mindset to say, okay, I don't understand it, but I know we have to do it, and I hire those great people, and they help me to show what we should do in the future, and then empower those people. But that's still a totally different mindset to what is core in the corporate world, and they are not used to that, and for them it's really difficult to go for that and to admit that they don't know everything. I just one story about that, because I did all those interviews, and then you also have this open working style, and that new employees should talk to the CEO and stuff like that, and the open door policy. And then I talked to a top manager of Daimler, and he said, it's not the problem of the younger ones. They would like to approach a CEO, but it's the problem of the older ones, because they don't know what they should do. If like this young guy asks them something, then he's kind of feared, because in the past his secretary kind of prepared it, and there was a list of answers that he should give to this younger person. But now if this younger person approaches this guy in the hallway and asks, hey, what do you think about this idea, then the senior guy is like really, he doesn't know what to do, and this has also a lot to do with fears, and to thinking about that, caring about that, and make sure that you also take care of the older ones, and not necessarily only
to me that sounds like a huge dilemma, that innovation comes from the bottom, if you want, from youth as well. However, it's still the old generation who in many industries and in many businesses have the final word. So how do we kind of cross that gap, and how do we make young people more putting them more in the driver's seat?
I mean, we took an initiative, and this was with the United Nations World Tourism Organization just a month ago. We had the first Tech Adventure Forum in Egypt. It was for regional startups to compete, first time in tourism in the region. So this is one way to change the mindset, change the narrative when it comes to tourism, that yes, innovation is important, it is encouraged, everyone can help contribute to having an easier trip, or booking easier, etc., etc. So I think that you need to embrace that, you need to create the enabling environment. We don't have to know it ourselves as regulators or as officials, but we need to realize its importance, and that it plays an important role in delivering the promises that are expected from government. More employment, more activity. You want travelers to come. Something else which is quite unique for travel as a sector, with the rhetoric of protectionism growing these days, people being able to move from country to country means there's more acceptance, there's more peace, there are more partnerships. It's one way to actually mesh this legacy and history with a lot of the new tools that technology provides. So I think there's, the first thing is to be accepting of change, and not being backwards in allowing those who know most, given the education that's taking place and you actually get the youth across countries learning from each other. Whether it's by having, meeting in different places, chatting, you have partnerships from youth and startups from different countries, all of this has to be actually encouraged. And I think it's fora like this that actually allow us as policymakers. We sat today in the morning for 3.5 hours discussing what change means, what innovation means, how we can create private-public collaboration, and all of these are positive points. Each one of us goes back, thinks about it, and tries in the organization to see how to motivate people, how to inspire people, and how to push forward.
A big part of change is fear, of course, that a lot of people are scared of being left behind, of not knowing enough, of being too old, of having nothing to say in the future. And that made me think of something you said, Caroline, that the winner takes it all mentality also of digitalization. Michael, aren't you scared? If you look at your business and you look at the big tech giants out there, if we move that along and say, okay, sooner or later the tourism industry will be taken over, maybe by Google, maybe by Amazon, maybe you take whatever you want, one of the big ones. Is there even space for smaller, kind of innovative companies like yours?
That's one of the reasons actually we started. So fear, no, I didn't see any fear. The biggest giant, of course, in our industry is Booking.com by far. So there's a few people in here, so they don't like me so much, but it's okay. Actually, but that's what you mentioned, the disruption. And we are really disrupting in the way we're offering this. The way our business model is working completely different than Booking.com. So fear, no, I don't see any fear. I only see opportunities. And that's also like the same in the company always. People are not allowed. I've got only one rule. People are not allowed to say the word problem.
Okay.
As soon as saying this, they have a big issue. Everything is a challenge.
So that's a mindset.
That's
already,
a mindset.
right?
That's a mindset. So this is.
And so we see it's the small things that that make change as well.
Yeah.
Can I just ask you to, let's say, more senior experts in this circle as well? Sven, I read somewhere you started 86.
Why me before?
No, I'll come to him. Don't worry. We can start with Mr. Schmid as well.
We're like the two guys on the balcony of the Muppet Show.
Always complaining, right? About but you started in the 80s with Scandinavian Airlines, where the tourism industry looked completely different. But if you look at what we just heard now, is there a risk of the industry being taken over by the disruptors or by the tech giants, that that it's not as the brave new world as we see it, but that we have a completely different landscape, which isn't more, which isn't freer than we have it today?
So we have to remember that although at the surface there are many things that have changed and are changing and rapidly, the fundamentals don't change. Mm-hmm. So again, one of the questions that I sometimes say we don't ask often enough is why. So this understanding the whys. Why do you do what you do? Mm-hmm. Why does Google do what Google does? Why do Amadeus do? So understanding the why helps.
Do we understand that? Probably not.
We oversimplify, and you can't simplify unless you understand the complexity. So sometimes we jump to conclusions without understanding the underlying complexity and why some things change and can and will change, and business models can change, and why some things don't change. Yeah. And I think that, so when looking at this, it's about accelerating and braking at the same time. And knowing when to push the speeder and knowing when to push the brake. So a company like us, we are being disrupted. Everybody would love to disrupt us. So it means we have to push the accelerator button or pedal.
Meaning you have to stay innovative as well.
And we have to stay relevant. We just have to push more on reinventing and disrupting ourselves, which of course is the big challenge. Now, if I were a startup, the best outcome may be that I was bought by one of the tech giants. It depends on what your aspirations are. So good luck.
Thank you. We'll talk about later on.
Andreas Schmid, if I can ask you the same question. I mean, you're a very experienced expert in that field as well, and you started with, we just had a chat before the event. You were with Mövenpick back in the days, a company highly innovative at their time, probably like a startup nowadays. You've seen the whole transition, and you've seen the whole kind of where it's going at the moment. Where do you see it still going in the future?
Personally, I believe that if successful companies are not really taking on board agenda, innovation, and with innovation, disruptive innovation, sooner or later you really have a huge problem, or you're gone. And without pinpointing here, but we have seen in the travel industry, we have seen in the hotel gastronomy industry, very successful groups which failed. And personally, I believe they have not at the right time done what I just said, innovative disruption or disruptive innovation. And on the other side, I even strongly believe that it should be, or we should be, and it starts on the top, we should be disruptive without making a messy disruption. So
you have to channel disruption in a way.
Be controlled. Be controlled, disruptive, and not just go in and make a mess. We have seen that as well. Therefore, if we don't do that from inside the company, and if you don't take that on the boards and the senior management agenda, you will be disrupted from outside. Sooner or later, I personally believe sooner. And if you do that, and then give to all what you believe there could be potential for innovation, give them a project and a project name, and have owners for that. And as board member, as senior management, you have to have access to these projects. You have to know every time in the day where you are with this project. Is it in line with what have been discussed and approved, so that you really, at the end, that you really are part of this innovation.
There you go. We almost have a blueprint of how innovation should work also on the board level. I'm sure Mrs. Frankenberger would sign that immediately. Let's not make a mess of the discussion as well. So meaning that I want to introduce all of you kind of invite you into the discussion. If you have anything to add, we still have 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. Any questions? I'll be looking around, and Caroline is around as well with the Cube microphone. Let me just see, is there one? Oh, in my back, as always. Oh, very good. There we have in the last row, Caroline.
Okay.
Are you a good catcher?
Are you a good catcher? Shall we try?
Yeah, let's do it.
Shall we try?
Yeah.
Here we go. I will get close enough.
He looks very sporty.
All right, here we go.
Maybe you could introduce yourself, just quickly tell us where you're from.
Yeah, my name's Ian Taylor. I'm a journalist with Travel Weekly in London. I wanted to make an observation and ask a question, if I may. Every bit of digital technology that we're talking about, the basis for it, computers, the internet, touch screens, GPS, absolutely everything was developed through government investment, not private investment, and then handed over to the private sector. So that's an important point to retain, really. My question was, shouldn't we be talking about what kind of innovation we want or need, not just about innovation as though it's something for its own sake? Innovation in automobile production now is going on an unimaginable scale into self-driving cars and electric cars. But what the world needs is for people to get out of cars. So, shouldn't we be talking more about what we need?
Who would you address that question to?
Well, all of you really. I've specifically to Sven, I'd like to know which governments and what investments he thinks are shouldn't be being made.
Great, thank you.
Oh,
Tough one.
It's interesting the point you're making, because originally when Amadeus was formed, a big part of that was an injection from a fund in the European Union. So yes, there was a helping hand from government at that stage, and look at where we're now. To me, the other question I think is easier to answer, so I'll answer that. why we're innovating, what is it we're trying to achieve. We had a great discussion today in the think tank that we were all fortunate enough to be, or privileged enough to be invited to. And what is it that we as an industry aspire to achieving? Where is it that we believe that the potential for real and meaningful innovation lies? How can we identify and develop the solutions that secure a sustainable future for the industry, and that we actually become a force for good, as we all believe we are, recognizing that we have a lot of challenges ahead of us. And this is to the Minister's point, and my personal opinion is the biggest potential for innovation that we have before us is in the way and the model in which we collaborate between public and private sector. And because we have so many challenges ahead of us, whether it's climate change or others, that can only be solved if we work together. Technology will, in a way, solve itself, but those big tickets, we need to find new models of doing that. So that's sort of my personal aspiration to contribute to that happening.
Any other thought on where should the innovation come from?
I just want to say that governments are always there for medium-term outlooks. We should not have knee-jerk reactions to something that shows up. And this is where innovation and policy frameworks comes in. So we should, as governments, for example, when Uber started, we all saw how regulations came in the way, and there were protests until, those.
Is it allowed in Egypt?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And I mean, it was not just an Egypt story; it was a France story, it was a U.S. story, et cetera, et cetera. So this idea of how you don't control too much, but at the same time have a soft landing or an orderly, innovative process is something that is learning by doing. And it's fantastic that the world is so integrated that an app which is in California, 2 days later will be in Kenya, 3 days later will be somewhere else. So there's a lot of advantage in terms of learning. And this is where all of us here is important to stay in touch and to keep an eye open and always have shared experiences that continue over time.
Absolutely. Colin Frankenberg, maybe a quick comment, and then we go to the next question, if possible.
Yes. I think it's a very important point, and we should definitely think about the why. And it's really, but then it also comes back to you have to combine, I think, innovation with like purposeful innovation. Because only telling the industry, oh, you need to be more sustainable and you need to save our resources, it's probably not going to work. But if you think about innovative business model that also kind of do something for the society and for the planet, I think that's the way we should head for. And I think it's a very good comment. Thank you.
We have a gentleman cradling the cube already. Please ask your question, sir.
I'm Jeff Lippman, and I'm the co-founder of an organization, an NGO called SunX, which is the Strong Universal Network, which is focused only on climate change. And the question I want to ask, it builds on the question that Ian raised before, which is, at what stage does innovation become such a dominant issue that the innovators forget their societal responsibilities? And I want to mention in that respect Facebook and Cambridge Analytica, where you have brilliant, genius companies so big they're operating outside what would be anybody's rational legal system, and by the time you catch them, they've disrupted the government and they've found 1,000 ways to reinvent themselves again because they've got countless numbers of PhDs and lawyers working on how to do that. So my question really is innovation in itself enough? Hasn't there got to be innovation with responsibility? And before I throw this back to you, if climate change is going to disrupt everything, which I believe it will do within 3 to 5 years, are these innovations just deck chairs on the Titanic?
Thank you very much for that question, because it's a good one that I'd love to give in as well. I mean, are we almost in an innovation or technology frenzy that we keep forgetting all these important other aspects, and that it might be overshadowing things like climate change, things like a society responsibility that we have. Michael, what do you think?
Indeed, good question. Yes, even though as a startup we're really thinking how can we do something in return, and one thing we will launch next year is for not related to climate change in this case, but do something back for society. So we want to, we will start a foundation, so kids who are not able to travel, donate something, and also organize travel for kids who are not able to travel because of sickness, because of other reasons, financial reasons. So yes, we are also, this is one of the topics we are discussing now, how we should set this up. Even though in the startup, which everything is related to data and everything growth, we still have this really, I said, one of the hot topics within our discussions, because we want to do something in return.
What do you think? Is that something typical of
I would like to also add to a comment on this question. So, what I think it's important in the past, so the organizations are kind of in the middle, and in the past we only looked at the economical circle and kind of the technological circle, and that was kind of it. And we said, okay, based on that, we're going to do our innovations and going to perform and maximize our profits. But that's what we shouldn't do anymore in the future. There are two more circles. There's the social circle and there's the environmental circle. And we should look at those circles as well. And not a lot of companies do that so far, but more and more companies are going in that direction, having this integrated, holistic thinking, and based on looking at all those different circles, then coming up with a strategy, then coming up with a new business model, and then thinking about how do I want to innovate and why do I want to do that. And I think having this integrated perspective is important, but then this also means you cannot maximize profits, but then it's profits under conditions. So you still have to make profits, but it's not the same level of profits that you would achieve if you would not go for the social and for the environmental sphere. So I think that's what we need to be aware of, and therefore it needs to be a normative thing that the top managers say, I want to go for that. And what we see in research, that family-owned companies are much more sustainability-driven than like shareholder-owned companies, because the shareholders nowadays still not kind of appreciate top managers to do that, but that's a whole different thing. And then just one more comment, then we also need to think about coming away from the linear business model where we just take the resources and then kind of throw them away at the end, and then into a circular economy. Otherwise it will not work. Otherwise it's just brushing kind of something to say we are sustainable, but we really need to change the entire business model. And that goes back to your point, then we need to work in ecosystems and collaborate with different organizations, collaborate with the government. Only then we can really make those big changes. And I'm a big supporter of that, and I'm doing a lot of research in that field, but I still feel when I talk to corporates, they are not there yet, so they're still maximizing their profits.
The clock is cruel. We have 1 minute left. But Minister, maybe one comment.
I just wanted to say that the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 SDGs, are very important in terms of government pushing that agenda, and therefore those who are doing innovation responsibly, if there's a term that we can give in the question, can be promoted, can be showcased as good examples, can be incentivized in some way. So I think we already have some modalities of what is good practice or what is responsibly sound, and those are in the Sustainable Development Goals.
The SDGs, which are crucial for the industry as well. Yes, Mr. Schmidt, please.
Now, in everybody's mouth and voice is the issue with CO2 fees, specifically for passengers, and we have already some proposals seen and read on the table. Personally, I could very, very nicely live with that as the chairman of an airport, but it has to go into innovation for less CO2, let's say turbines, aircrafts, whatsoever, but definitely not in people's security systems and whatsoever. I think the purpose has to be very clear, what it is for.
I'm very afraid that we're opening up a discussion which could lead us into another 2 or 3 hour discussion. Exactly. So I will have to stop it there. The clock is actually down at 0. I would have loved to hear more questions. If there is one that can be asked in 10 seconds and even answered in 5, that would be fantastic. I will give you one more. I will hear about it later from my director saying, why did you allow that? But please, the lady in the second row, please make it as short as possible, and we'll give you the shortest answer possible.
Yeah, hello, my name is Irene. I'm from Kenya, but I work for a group of hotels in Italy. I think the main problem is that we are not trying to find out if the teaching methods in the schools are really properly introduced for the digital world.
Yeah. That is something we're going to talk about tomorrow as well, because talent will be one of the main issues and topics and themes throughout these 2 days. And I promise you that's something we're going to discuss tomorrow as well on a panel. So if you're still around, which I hope, please come back to me and I'll ask that question to the panelists tomorrow as well. I think we'll leave it there. Thank you very much. I know it's a short discussion, but we had some very interesting insights and inputs. Thank you very much to all the panelists. Thank you. Thank you so much.